Captain's log. Stardate. Who gives a shit? Yes, hello all, it's Scott, and welcome to the game Asylum, blah 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 blah. So, the Callisto protocol, that hot newishness from the dudes that brought you Dead Space, I've played it, and I have some opinions on this one, like a lot, because this game, it hurt me. Okay, a tad dramatic, but I haven't played something this odd since I covered the Quantic Dream games. So yeah, I'm just begging for a cutaway so we can get into this tripe. Please cut away. Pretty please. The Callisto Protocol was released on December 2nd, 2022, on everything apart from the Sega Saturn, and is a title by Striking Distance Studios. Their first one, and in recent news, probably their last. It was also published by Krafton, who also published the casual racism in a voice chat simulator, PUBG. And why am I mentioning this? We will get into that. Callisto is also a brand new AAA entry into the survival horror genre, bolstered by the marketing telling everyone that this title was being led by Glenn Schofield, the co-creator of Dead Space, who, since the dissolution of Visceral, the developers of Dead Space, was stuck in a Call of Duty slave pens, with his last outfit called Sledgehammer Games. And they also created one of the most polarizing entries of that series, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, starring the walking grease trap Kevin Spacey, being played by a cute cat in this video, because the YT Gestapo kept claiming this clip, and that's probably for the best. Either way, press F to perpetuate this tired meme. After all this junk, our boy Glenn wanted to dwell on past glories, so in 2019 he formed Striking Distance to make a spiritual successor, and I remember people being quite hyped for it. And while I think hype is still cancer, I will admit I am a slut for sci-fi horror schlock, so when Dorito Pope Jeff gave us a world premiere trailer of it back in 2020, it was certainly the best part of that language shit show. Honestly, who watches this crap? Fuck. We start this tirade with our protagonist Jacob and his snarky sidekick Max, who are discussing the news of a terrorist attack on Europa, which so happened to be their last drop-off point. And while they bicker like an old married couple because they're one job away from retirement, etc., this bonding session is interrupted by a yellow light in the cargo hold, so our avatar is sent to check it out. Cue the steam vent jump scare. Son of a bitch. Nice. After checking on the tampons, it turns out that the Outer Way, the terrorist group on Europa, has boarded the vessel, so Jacob must sneak his way through the ship back to Max. But oh no, the leader of this group, Danny Nakamura, wants to do something to them. Whatever that is, I'm not sure. But as we need to amp this shit up, our boy decides to flush him out the nearest airlock, which leads to, of course, standard gaming set piece number 4569, which sends them crashing into the dead Jupiter moon of Callisto, home of Black Iron Prison. Once Jacob comes around, he discovers that Max is half the man he used to be. Don't worry, the game will be using this imagery to the point of parody throughout. And we are also introduced to Captain Ferris, played by Sam Witwer, who sounds like he's rubbing himself through his trouser pocket with every word. And oh no, it seems like Danny survived the crash too, so our lead has been framed for being a bad man. And cue the opening sting.
I didn't do anything!
Sexy. Anyway, we get more verbal fellatio from Sam.
You know they call Callisto the dead moon. Dead. Just like you would have been if I hadn't fished you out of that wreck. I mean, shit. As far as anyone else is concerned, you are dead.
And of course, the warden of Black Iron Prison.
Choice. Every choice in your life has led you here. To this moment. To this place. The only place where you truly belong.
I can't believe this story you're telling me. It's macabre.
You may also notice that Jacob is making your brain do that Leo DiCaprio pointing meme. That's because he's played by Josh Duhamel. And let me pause so we can take in that star power of this titan of thespianism.
The fuck are you looking at?
There's been a mistake. My name is Jacob Lee. I'm not an inmate.
You were inmate 532-521.
No. I'm just a cargo pilot. I was attacked by the outer wing.
Hey, don't be looking at IMDb to find out who this bloke is. Just be one with his aura. Okay, he was in a bunch of Transformers flicks. Oh well. Let's have some torture porn to lighten the mood, administered by Dr. Middle-aged Lara Croft.
No! You're a goddamn doctor!
Yes, and I intend to faithfully execute my responsibilities. Try not to move, it'll only make things worse.
Oh, fuck you!
Exquisite. Granted, I'm being a sarky bitch. Josh does his job well, to be fair, as well as the rest of the cast. The problem here is that they don't have much to work with, and we can dwell on that later, because we need to be reminded that this is a quote horror game. And as you probably already predicted, Jacob has been in his cell for like 5 minutes, before this facility looks like Michael Bay's Red Room. While shuffling through the halls, Jacob bumps into another inmate called Elias.
Bruv, what the fuck is going on?
I don't know what the hell's going on. My ship crashed, I got thrown in here, and then I woke up to this.
Well, look. You're that pilot they just brought in, yeah? Yeah, well, look, I've been in here half my life. I know this place. I've got a plan to get out.
Ow, God. Do you hear that noise? That I'm going to die horribly as a plot contrivance noise? Where's that coming from? So we make our way to Bust Out Bruv. This is where we are introduced to the rampant QTEs, which I turned off in the options menu because I'm not getting carpal tunnel for this shit. And of course we're introduced to the combat, and I don't want to talk about the combat right now. So let's talk about the graphics. Mostly I'm more about the game's art style and performance over say raw pixels or photorealism. And personally I feel like talking about them in a video where you can see them for yourself is redundant. But for Callisto, we need to talk about them graphics, because this is the main meat of the game. Its look, its vibe are its main intent. Even on the main menu, instead of an option like New Game or something of that nature, we are greeted with New Experience, and that to me is very telling. By clicking on this button, you are here to experience this game rather than play it. Like, we've moved away from interactivity, and now we have the tech to show you plebs how to engage with this piece of art. Yeah, perhaps Glenn spent too much time in the COD mines and lost perspective on what makes a game, but we are floating off course here. While it looks pretty, and the lighting really conveys the cold metallic dungeon Jacob is scurrying through, it also highlights how formal and stuffy the level design of this place is. Which is thematically relevant, as this is a prison. You know, this isn't a hotel, you are here as punishment, but riddle me this. Before this place was taken over by diet necromorphs, and taking into account that this prison planet probably has no health or safety protocols, or human rights, is there a need to have spiked walls and open machinery dotted around the place? Sure, it might be good for motivation, but in this pro-capitalistic world this story is set in, that's an accident claim waiting to happen, right? Sorry. This is what happens when I have to talk about the obvious shit. My mind just wanders. Sure, for a visual medium, there will be leaps in how games will look with the progression of technology, but that's only the sugary shell encapsulating all the other things that are needed to make this certain type of media. Graphics are important, but when they diminish the other aspects of its design, making the lads at Digital Foundry hot under their heat sinks may have been a bad idea. And I touched on this in my walking simulators video. But to truncate that feature-length screed, if you are doubling or tripling down on one aspect of the game, you need to make sure that all the others are either polished to a mirror shine, or so minor, we as the consumers don't miss their absence. And now we can talk about the combat. What pushed me to fork over my hard-earned wasn't the premise itself, as it looked interesting, but not full price interesting. Instead, it was these clips all over social media of people taking the tools to duff up the nasties and, well, look at this. This gonzo display of brutality got my PS2 jank sense tingling. I mean, look at it. Would you want a slice of that? Yeah. The main loop of dodging and counter-attacking, while looking and sounding impressive, is mind-numbingly easy to play. By holding left or right on the analog stick, as a nasty throws a punch, Jacob throws his head in the opposite direction, like a wino with a burst eardrum, opening up our pugilist partner for a hard bonk across the breadbasket, with either a follow-up shot from a ranged weapon, or if you're using more than 10% of your brain, you just grab them with a telekinesis skill and launch them for a quick and easy kill. One thing to note of how the combat feels is that once you push the attack button, Jacob is committed to swinging his truncheon like a porker at a pride rally, and there is no way of cancelling this motion unless you get hit by your opponent, making the combat feel stiff and restrictive, and in most fights, if you stick to the fisticuffs, end in a brutal pre-animated takedown, which is fine for that spectacle, but once you realise that most of these fatalities are locked behind a paywall, my bullshit-o-meter starts to beep. At least this side content gives you Callisto's version of the Mercenaries mode from Resident Evil, where you can fully explore the sandbox of different offensive abilities Jacob has, but during this gauntlet you may notice that this loop rarely deviates. There is a distinct lack of expression here, and when you have seen Jacob swing for the hills with the grace of an abattoir worker who refuses to use the stun gun, you have seen his entire moveset. This isn't, say, Devil May Cry, where you're given a small yet focused set of moves that a seasoned player can string together in a bombastic display, with a skill ceiling that incentivizes creative play. No, the intent for Callisto's brawling is to keep it in a realm of reality. You know, its emphasis on the vibes, man, which undercuts any visceral feedback, and this clip that attracted me to this title, in the eyes of the devs, is embarrassing. Ergo, a patch to stomp out the ability for us, the player, to find fun ways to play the game. Because intentional or not, in the eyes of the creator, it takes away from the experience. But if this is just Streets of Rage if it was made by Blumhouse, you would think taking on multiple buffoons should be a given. But no, that's another thing that got, quote, fixed, because before the patch that removed the gonzo combat, it also tweaked how you took on groups. You see, before the fix, every mutant in the room would gangbang you like Piers Morgan at a Tory sex dungeon. But now, the devs have inserted a gentleman's code, and instead of the ghouls foaming at the mouth to turn Jacob's joy department into a novelty bath sponge, they just stand there, fluffing themselves, until you finish their mates off. And I find it galling that we had to do a balance patch for a fucking single player game. But if Callisto was this raw on release, why put it out when these issues could have been hammered out before that release? Well, we know why, don't we? And while it looks desperate and impactful, the combat in the Callisto protocol, after a very short amount of time, feels like a chore, and its emphasis on melee, while novel in the horror space, lacks that apprehension or threat of going within striking distance. Like when Isaac Clarke flails his meat hooks to beat off a necromorph in his personal space, or when James Sunderland swings a plank of wood. These are used as a panic button, or a way to save on resources. They're not ideal, but if you can't avoid getting into CQC, this option is here as a fallback. It's a last resort. So if you're going to make the hand-to-hand the main focus, firstly you gotta make it satisfying, and secondly you gotta make it risky. If you're not going to rely on shooting, and the interplay of managing your precious ammo and resources, you got to incentivize the player into doing it, and Callisto doesn't do that. Oh sure, you will die horribly if you do get hit, and you'll be collecting stuff constantly by stomping a mud hole into everything like an obsessive compulsive Steve Austin, but this is all undone when the shop has all the ammo for your weapons as well as health items, meaning if you do get your shit pushed in, you can top up for next to nothing. And granted, it will be a struggle at first because the game is very stingy with money, but once you work out the weapon upgrades, apart from the flat damage increases, are redundant, you will have plenty of dosh to spend. Such as an upgrade for the baton where you can counter hit a goon after a successful block sounds great, but the secret to this game that they never tell you is that blocking is fucking pointless, as you lose health, which you don't by dodging. So while I could guard for the off chance of a witty retort, when I can just duck and maim without losing HP, it's kind of pointless. And don't get me started on the special attacks. Okay, please do, because they're so uninspired. Throughout Jacob's bad day, you will come across 5 ranged weapons. A pistol, a shotgun, another pistol, and, oh god, I'm sweating with anticipation. Oh wait, no I'm not, it's another shotgun. With the outlier being a rifle, which makes all the other weapons obsolete for its rapid lead injection of death. And the alternative fire modes, like I just mentioned, for most of these guns suck. Apart from the first pistol and the shotgun that fire explosive rounds, the others range from fine to terrible. The hand cannon, for example, fires a burst of bullets, but the recoil is so severe that most of the bursts will sail over your target's head. And the other two have bullets that home in on their target, in a game where you shoot shit at close range, which is, as you can imagine, stunning creativity, especially when the game you're trying to invoke has shit like this. Was it practical? No, but it sure was fun. Also, to buy these final upgrades cost so much dosh, it took me 2.5 playthroughs to fully spec Jacob out. So you can get why I'm a tad salty when you come to the realization that these abilities are not worth the investment. Anyway, after the endless rant about the shite gameplay, and after getting his shit pushed in by the first ghoul, Jacob makes his way to the control tower, where the snake-tongued warden Ferris is auditioning for the next COD game.
Sir, Squad 9 is gone.
Hold your position.
We're hit. Fall back. We've lost containment.
All right, then activate all tactical units. You are weapons free. Repeat, you are weapons free.
Always on the grind, that lad. But this session is cut short, as he force grips our boy trying to sneak by. Oh shit, that's Starkiller from The Force Unleashed. And I'm not a Star Wars fan, but holy shit, that game is great. And oh, he also played the voice of Deacon St. John in Days Gone, with that naturalistic dialogue that made him sound like a mumble-mouthed tosser.
When I told the colonel about my military service, I told him I hated every goddamn minute of it, but maybe it wouldn't have been so bad if I'd served under someone like you.
Moving on. After doing the usual bad guy shtick, sadly he doesn't have a mustache to twiddle, Jacob manages to get the door open and let some of the mutated inmates give our antag a cuddle, and we make our way towards Elias, who tasks our avatar to go to the SHU, the maximum security section of the prison, to find a hacker that can call a ship to get them out. Of course, as this is a video game, this isn't a straight A to B traversal, so we take the scenic route via the medical bay. Oh hey, look, it's this scene. Do you remember Dead Space? And this is where Cubby learns how to stab a bitch, using the exact same stealth system as the Evil Within. Sneaky. And we encounter the second Fakenor variant, the Spitter, and I guess the devs played a lot of L4D on breaks. Anyway, after showing our new guest Betsy, yes I called my rifle Betsy, Jacob climbs into a vent. In fact, he crawls into a lot of vents. We can talk about him scurrying through the HVAC like a man-sized gerbil later, but we have to comment about this corridor that's dripping in atmosphere. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Look kids, it's David Cage! And press X to emote this, you fuck! This is where Jacob finds his Force Gauntlet. And yeah, it behaves just like in Dead Space. It's fun enough, but this is a distraction, as you may have noticed that we are walking through a lot of bloody corridors, while beating up the same looking dudes. And when the game threatens to show us something interesting, like this room with all the screws strung up, we get pushed to another dull part, like this striking piece of horror is too much for our wandering minds to comprehend. Well, hold on there, Jerry, we have a new monster to contend with, the Long Neck. Actually, I don't know what they're called, but once you see them, you will groan when they grab you the next 20 fucking times in this story. And fun fact, this was originally a cut monster from Dead Space, and while I don't have an official reason why it wasn't included in that series, I have a pretty good hunch. After a long section I just can't be asked to comment on, we make it to the shoe to find out that the hacker inside the maximum security wing is of course Danny, who nopes out of the Chuckle Brothers' plan to escape.
Thanks. I'll take my chances. A word of advice, though? Don't trust him. He's not what he seems.
I like her. She's feisty. Also, I love it when games have arenas with no enemies, because you kill them quicker than the game thinks you will. So you just stand there, waiting for this wonderfully crafted set piece to time out so we can move on. I mean, all this effort for a boring roadblock. This fucking game in a nutsack. And speaking of a colonoscopy, Jacob climbs for another vent, and another, and another, and fuck off! Sorry, I got interrupted there. Where were we? Oh yeah, we must squeeze our way through here like sweaty toothpaste in a metallic tube. So I think this is a perfect time to talk about the flow of this. Oh come on! If you thought the fighting was simplistic, the level design is almost minimalist. Now, I don't mind linear games. I'll happily take a crafted experience over anything with a map the size of Mordor. But fuck me, there is a limit to linear game design, and I think Callisto, for me, is that limit. But first we must crawl through another tunnel. Yeah, I've proven my point. This is the main way to get through the game, and while it could be a fine metaphor for Jacob, a mouse stuck in this huge unfeeling machine, my theory as to why we must cha-cha slide through this shit is due to the game loading between rooms. Because the graphics were pushed so hard, there is no other way of feeding this shit into modern hardware, apart from a loading screen of course. So Callisto uses vents to slow the player down, so they can load in another dull area for us to dredge through. And you're probably already thinking, but wait, didn't Dead Space do this too? And yes, it did, but instead of ambling through at a snail's pace, crawling through the vents was an exception, and not the only way for Isaac to get through this world. But in Callisto, just like the combat, as soon as you've seen it once, get ready to see it for the entire runtime. And sure, you do get the odd branching path, which will lead you to a chest filled of goodies, even though the rewards are so pitiful it's not even worth the effort. And the only other way to break up the tedium is the game's only puzzle, where you grab a fuse from one broken switch and slam it into another. And I know I said this in the last video, that I wasn't a puzzle guy, but Jesus shitmas, this is fucking lame. Oh, the robots. I love the robots. Early on when I was ranting about how shite the combat was, for what felt like an eternity, Jacob has to sneak past a metal brute, and you are told straight away that these tin men don't fuck around. And it's a pretty cool sequence. Sure, it's a little contrived, but hey, at least I felt like I was in danger. And if you do get caught,
You will comply.
ooh, sriracha. But then later on, when you see another one of these fuckers, you, okay. So I can shoot them in the face to stun them, right?
Lost. Service required.
Wow, fuck me for being tense. Why introduce these death-dealing dipshits to then cut their capacitors off an hour later? We had a genuine attempt to put some pressure on the player, but nope. Good job, Glenn. As Jacob crawls through a river of shit to get to the next contrived set of goalposts, on his way through the Hershey Highway, he bumps into a new variant of... do these things have a name? Okay, they're called biophages. Okay, but now they have a hentai edition, and if you don't shoot the tentacles in time, they evolve into a scaly fuck with razor sharp claws. I'd still do it. And oh look! Hey, do you remember Dead Space? After Jacob purges the pee and poop from the prison septic tank, he notices that these monsters are just clumps of flesh, clinging to the walls like spunk at a peep show. And this is where we're shown another monster that can cloak itself, which, oh okay, that looks promising. I wonder what strategies do we need to use to take them on? Oh right, yeah, never mind. But fuck all that, it's slip and slide time. We... Yeah, after going through a few more spooky corridors, we end up at the biodome, and sadly we don't see Paulie Shaw. We have, oh shit, another robot. Okay, channel your inner Sam Fisher, Scott. You got this.
Shut it down.
So, in this section we are doing something? I know Elias said bruv and other roast beefisms. Oh, and we have that room that's in all the trailers, with that spinning bladed meat grinder thing, which is hilarious. I mean, who designed this place? Rob Zombie. And after all this shite, we finally meet with our mate in the flesh. And suddenly, a heartfelt moment grabs us by the collar.
I never asked you. What are you in for?
What? You worried you're helping a murderer escape?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Well, you are, man. So what? Look, it was a long time ago, yeah? I was defending myself. Wrong place, wrong time. I made a lot of bad decisions back then.
Yeah, well, you were probably just dealt a shitty hand.
No. It was just to blame everyone else. But then I realized this was on me. You can't keep running from what you've done.
Couldn't say it better myself. There's always a price to pay.
Oh, come on, this plot was just about to get interesting. Oh, wait, why am I reacting to this? It's fucking pre-recorded. Anyway, the Cubster crawls through the tundra, which looks pretty sweet. And aha, you all owe me £1 because of course our geezer does his contractual obligation.
Gotta get you to cover. Come on, come on. Yes, you can. It's not that far. It's not that far. Come on. No. Hey, we gotta keep going. We gotta keep going. Come on.
No, bro. I'm done. Thank you. It's because of you. I got out.
Yep, so long mate, I hardly knew ya, because this shit was written on the back of a used condom packet. But unfortunately we have no time to mourn, as Danny comes over to mutilate the corpse of our fair weather friend, and tell this armoured chucklefuck where to go next. After some more stabbing, we find Danny fighting for her life in the room above, so this triggers another timed arena battle.
Got my own problems to deal with!
Yeah, skip ahead, this is going to take a mo. And after that captivating standoff, Kane and waifu Lynch settle into a fragile alliance to GTFO this frigid shithole. After some tasteful fast forwarding, Danny and Jacob drive to the wreck of his old ship, but instead of finding whatever she wanted to find, they find nothing but a jump scare from his old friend. You know, for variety. And as we know the MO of this story, that when shit starts getting intriguing, it's time to move on, because our pair are now rushing to call down a ship, but the warden shoots it down, causing another bombastic set piece, which I found oddly nostalgic. And let's not forget another jump scare. And our duo wake up in the bowels of this moon, where the original colony of space miners lived, and of course get separated due to shenanigans. And Jacob wakes up well hung, with a blind nasty getting too close for comfort. And here comes the stealth section. And yeah, it's not really a stealth section, where Jack has to contend with staying in the shadows or any of that bollocks. I will say it made me uncut my nuts and pay attention, but then when you realise that these things only detect you by sound, and if you remain crouched they don't hear you, that tension slowly melts away, and doubly so if you silently dispatch them. Yep, the spirit of Rikimaru lives through thee, and also watch as I stab an entire room of goons. And I'm playing on the hardest skill, by the way. The reason why we're crawling through this corridor of blind spots is to make our way back to Danny in the most conspicuous manner possible. And we get introduced to another monster.
Hold on, I've got something. So this is Two-Head from the Callisto Protocol. I'm sure that the first time you see him, you will be very scared.
Finally, Jacob makes his way into the colony, and yes, it's more of these Jerrys just ambling about. But wait, the Cubster finds Danny jacked into one of the villagers, and once again, and just as the game is threatening to be interesting,
I was in their mind, reliving their memories. There was an outbreak 75 years ago, just like what's happening in the prison. They killed everyone. Trying to contain it. Everyone. These aren't accidents. There's a pattern. Arcus, Black Iron, Europa. They're all connected. Watch
out! Yep, here we go again. You know what? I partially take back what I said about Outlast. At least it didn't waste my cocking time. And of course, Jacob falls down again, and we have to go through the same fucking area we just went through. But then, the game called the Callisto Protocol gets good. Kind of. You see, once we reach the heart of the colony, Danny and our avatar find another biodome, and inside, Jacob discovers a huge alien, which started this outbreak, that uses these little parasites to spread its disease. And it turns out, those medical supplies that our boy has been delivering hold multiple vials of these little shits in a hidden compartment. And finally, some fucking good schlock to chew on.
Oh, God.
5, 2, 1.
Well, back to the grindstone. And oh no, Danny has been infected. And can someone take away that Mad Libs book from Glenn? Please. Tropes aside, we are finally at the endgame of this journey. And wouldn't you know, the last hour of this story is pretty good. Okay, I wouldn't say it's flat out good, but at least we finally get some meat on these bare bones in terms of narrative. and this is easily the tightest level design in the game, with a good pace of fights and exploration. After making her way back into Black Iron, this story just meanders, so fucking run with it, Jacob gets contacted by Dr. Lara. You know, the one that gave him his health bar at the start? Anyway, stricken with guilt over what she's done, she tells Jacob to meet her at her lab, because she has Danny and she knows a way to save her. And this is also where our hero comes to the realization that this prison was built as a testing ground.
Experimenting on the prisoners. Figures. How long were they doing this? Was the UJC behind this too? Looks like they were trying to see how long it takes to turn into those things.
Well, yeah, no shit, we kind of got that right at the start of the game. Anyway, we catch up with the good doctor, who gives him a mind injection from Danny's suit that gives him what really happened on Europa. Also, she shows him this.
Okay, just tell me how we can cure her.
You can use this to synthesize an antidote, but you'll need to extract a sample from the warden's elf.
Is what?
The goal of this madness. His ridiculous protocol. During the original outbreak, a colonist known as Subject Zero demonstrated a unique ability to synthesize the biophage, to control it.
Yeah, I heard in the recording something about bigger, stronger.
The next phase of human evolution. Unfortunately, he was killed during the Arca's sterilization. Now, the Warden seeks to replicate the conditions of the original outbreak, hoping to recreate Subject Zero as Subject Alpha.
Subject Alpha, huh? Stunning creativity, Glenn. And now armed with the injector that can save Danny, Jacob must beat that brat with a baseball bat to draw out its blood to save his sidekick. But first, that memory that was uploaded to his noggin has finally kicked in. And to truncate this titwank, Jacob's willful ignorance on what they were delivering to Europa is what caused the outbreak. And the girl that Danny sees in the opening video is her little sister. And the guilt of this whole situation sends him into a tailspin of denial. Yeah, it's not exactly Silent Hill 2, but hey, it's something, right? But forget all that, because we find out who is behind this fucking plot. And it's the Illuminati. Oh, fuck. And look, they even decorated their own little office with all the shit that will make a Freemason jizz their little white supremacy speedos. And I feel like I'm having a fucking stroke.
I've been watching you. You and your so-called friend. You're not the innocent you claim to be. You've proven that you'll do just about anything to ensure your own survival.
The survivor.
And what about you, huh? Watching people die for fun? Is that your protocol?
No. You are mistaken, Mr. Lee. The protocol isn't about death. It's about life. Our future lies out there. Our destiny. But we were not built for life in space. This fragile shell holds us back.
Wait, what? This fucking game is set on a fucking moon orbiting Jupiter. And Jacob is a guy working for Space Amazon, delivering packages all over the Milky Way. So what good would it be to feed the human race body horror worms to help in the exploration of the endless expanse? Apart from, I guess, keeping intergalactic cleaning firms in business. But furthermore, this raises more questions than answers, and not in a good way. Because in the grand scheme of the story, Jacob, while he may feel guilty for causing the outbreak, which he knew the cargo that he had caused, he's not the one in charge here. But everyone around him treats him like he perpetuated this whole thing, when all he was, in actuality, was a bloke caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yes, he could feel guilty for the incident, that's valid, but he isn't the bad guy here. But he's been selected because he's a survivor, which... what? Before my fucking brains explode, it's time for the final boss, which is of course Subject Ferris Alpha, who goes all William Birkin. And of course Jacob just beats the living shit out of him, and then saves his partner from the parasitic purgatory. Then the warden sets this shithole to self-destruct, naturally, and panic ensues as there's only one escape pod, so Cubby throws Danny into the tube with all the evidence to expose all this shit. And then the credits roll. Oh, thank God, it's finally over. Wait.
Jacob, there might be a way out after all.
Reactor core temporary safeties activated.
But I'm going to need your help.
Hey, do you remember that moment in Dead Space 3 when EA did an EA and lopped off the epilogue to the single player game and sold it as DLC? Well, guess fucking what, kids? We're going into overtime. Yep, it seems like old dogs refuse to learn new tricks. And a few months after this masterpiece, Striking Distance dropped a final chapter of this story called The Final Transmission, where we learned what happened to our hero after Black Iron blew up. And if you have half a fucking brain, you can see where this shit is going. But hey, maybe they'll learn from their mistakes and the avalanche of feedback from the players of this shit. You never know, they may give us a reason to fork over more money to play 3 more hours of the same bollocks. Alright, after the recap of this stunning story, we fall behind the back of Jacob again as he saunters through the prison to find the doc, who is of course back in her lab. But this time, it's going all psychological horror, where the world twists and turns in strange ways. Gee, I wonder why. And of course, the good doctor sends Jacob on one last job to recover USB drives that will expose the warden even more, because the stuff that Danny got given at the end of the last story wasn't enough, apparently. What's on these drives? Who cares? Probably dick pics. And we get a hint that Miss Croft was behind something more sinister than all the Burks we've been bashing so far. And you are going to laugh when you see it.
Cole viewed the inmates as disposable, a means to an end. I swore I'd never do that. Until I did. The desire to prove him wrong blinded me to the consequences of my own actions. What have I done?
Oh, play some Fozzie and shut the fuck up. And as a good video twat, I should give you some insight on the flow of this extra content. But honestly, it's the same old shit. We get the beat 'em up, we get the stealth, and of course, the most important part, walking through a pool of shit, and oh wow, look at this! A puzzle that's different than sticking a fuse in a switch. Hell yeah, game. Hell yeah. And here is that revelation I just teased.
Oh my God.
Before you is my greatest sin. For even though Cole and I took different paths, we each had the same goal in mind. Like you, I realize the mistakes I have made. Ironically, this particular mistake may just be our last hope.
What? How can this be our last hope? What can a T-850 covered in dog food do for humanity? Apart from decreasing the population one squash noggin at a time. Was Glenn playing with his Duplo when he came up with this? I swear to God, it's like writing while in a fever dream. But hey, at least we get a new toy to play with, which at first swing has a nice meaty feel, but then it quickly dawned upon me that this is just a baton but cooler. But I will admit, turning these goons into paste with one swing was quite amusing. Sadly, this new toy doesn't carry over to the main game on New Game Plus, because fuck you. And if you thought the robots were a joke before, now they're a belly laugh covered in pork belly. But at least you can smash boxes like a striking hammer, brother. Please, I want to get off this ghost train ride. I'm falling asleep. On our way to another ship to escape this godforsaken place, Dr. Lara is constantly on the radio telling Jacob to meet her. But then she appears out of nowhere and gets a tentacle injection. which leads to a blatant guilt metaphor with a funky downward spiral staircase.
This isn't about escape, Jacob. Not anymore!
Soon everything will become clear.
This was our fault.
Yes, very symbolic. Shit. Which of course leads into, and I've been waiting to say this, a shitty boss fight with our mutated Quack. And it's the first one with an actual health bar and strategy that wasn't a gory version of Punch-Out. You see, this time you have to shoot the weak spot like it's fucking House of the Dead. And before we talk about the end of this stunning display of chaff, I just wanted to say that I thought the main story was nonsensical, but at least that final quarter was dumb enough to be noteworthy. Hell, even laughable, like watching a 50s B movie while your brain is starved of oxygen. But here, this is where I went from being down on Callisto to full on hating it.
We have to hurry, Jacob. There's still a chance.
It can't be. Why didn't you listen?
Jacob, are you with me?
Almost there.
Final report, Dr. Caitlin Marlowe. I found him in the Warden's Tower and dragged him here. His link to Danny's core still active. I used this connection to upload the full details of the experiment. Whether it will be received, I can't say. But it was our only hope to get the truth out there. To turn his sacrifice into opportunity.
Data transfer complete.
Finally. Jacob, you did it. And now, your fight is done.
Fuck off, Glenn. So yeah, that was quite the adventure. And I will be honest and say that this game took me to places that I didn't expect. Some good, some bad, well, mostly bad, and others that ping-pong between these emotions. What I'm trying to say in this tirade of twattery is that all the ingredients to make a fun game are here, but the team at striking distance seem to undercut themselves at every single turn. It's like they had 100 ideas and over time refined them to a distinct few, but instead of adding something to these core pillars of design, they just sanded all the edges off, making the game to be this palatable slice of flavourless paste that is inoffensive and made for everyone, which in a genre such as horror, a film of artistic expression that thrives on making the audience uncomfortable, this is a huge problem. But then we have to talk about the fucking PUBG thing. While not well known in the West, the publisher for this game, Krafton, is basically South Korea's version of EA or Activision or some other corpo slimeballs, making this industry unsustainable with their high-priced, low-enjoyment tat. But for our subject, their claim to infinite money is they own the rights to PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or PUBG if you can't be fucked to write all that bollocks. Now, in my 5 hours of play back in 2017, I would say I had fun with a handful of matches, even though Battle Royale games to me are an hour of foreplay with 10 seconds of action. Basically, PUBG and others of its ilk aren't really a thing for me, and especially the last thing on my mind was why my dull blank sheet for a meat puppet is endlessly being dropped onto an island to be wasted by some teenager that screams racial epithets like a bunch of white dudes on a Saints Row server. Okay, to give it its due, I did go and check some lore videos on this universe, and fuck me, the exposition is so dry and lifeless. It's like that opening live action intro from MGS4, interspersed with infomercials about some boring shit I can't even fathom right now. But old Crafty Wank is all about building an empire, so they bought or created studios to make either ports or spin-off games on its juggernaut. And well, let's just say this hasn't gone to plan. So when Glenn Schofield pitches his new take on the horror genre, old Captain Crunch wants to staple this milquetoast shite to this idea. And while the actual conversation that went down would never see the light of day, in my mind's eye I can see Glenn gritting his teeth as he signed on that dotted line, and then probably spent the rest of the production trying to convince his purse strings that making a sci-fi horror romp that harks back to their main jizz canon won't do the PUBG story any favours. And then later on in May of last year, 6 months before the game was shipped, Glenn posted a tweet saying that Callisto was no longer part of its master's universe. And this is where I found my thesis statement, as it sheds light on not only how AAA gaming and the suits that run this bullshit ruin the fucking art that's created, but why the narrative of this game is so slapdashed and barren. Now, taking a step back, would this story be better with all the PUBG shit left in? Probably not, but at least it was something, and it was not this pathetic, bland and forgettable void of tedium after tearing out the guts of his contractual obligations. And then you have to contend with that the best story within this universe is not in the fucking game.
All I did was unlock a door.
A door you should have left shut. He was worth 5 times as much alive, and now all we have is some gruesome holotape to turn in. We need that money. We deserve it.
Not as much as they deserved their revenge. Definitely not as much as he deserved what was coming.
That may be, but his dead ass barely pays for the fuel on this trip. You know how much it costs to fly from Europa to Io? We can't afford to be zipping all around the patrolled zone.
There were children in those cages! Children! I need to sit down.
You never used to be like this.
Yeah, well, time changes everything.
So you're telling me you had Gwendolyn Christie and Michael fucking Ironside hidden away in this gem of a side story, but they're not in your game? You had the voice of Sam Fisher, and you couldn't crowbar this fucking legend of not only pulpy trash that I and many others adore, but a legend of science fiction. No, I can't. Look, I know I've said a lot of things about the Callisto Protocol. There is a tiny pit in my guts for shitting all over this game. Oh yeah, sure, YouTube loves it when I and others throw a freak in a cage and poke it with a stick, but I always feel hollow after that rush of catharsis when I get to use all my saved up penis analogies. For a game such as this, I can see the verve of the people behind it, who just want to make a fun, engaging thing, and how that earnestness can be perverted along the way, through means beyond its control. Sure, you could argue that this game is another notch against crunch culture, and Glenn caught a ton of flack for making a tweet about that, which he later clarified as passion, which is yikes. But I do believe, even with all this stuff, that this project started with the best of intentions. And while the blame lands on the tip of the spear, I can also see someone who may have been a figurehead behind the scenes of his past glories. He then, here, exposed himself in a way that caused him to question his own talents as an artist. And when you let someone like this off the proverbial leash, you may find out that yes, he had a banger idea a long time ago, but unfortunately, that's all they have. And as a collaborative endeavour, games are a sum of their sizable team of parts. So when you are pushing the narrative of an auteur, the blame for all the shortcomings will land on their heads. And while my opinions on Schofield are mild, this whole ploy that he was the former lead of Dead Space was all for marketing, as we are more susceptible to buying into a human struggle than a bunch of brand names that tell you nothing. In a way, this entire show, if you want to call it that, is quite cynical. And like I said, I don't have any opinions on the man himself, but ultimately, he lived by the sword and he died by the sword. And the only legacy that the Callisto Protocol has right now is this external story of failure and corporate meddling, as well as its polarizing opinions by the people who played it. But to me, the Callisto Protocol doesn't get a recommendation, unless you can get the whole shebang for a price of a Happy Meal on Steam, or just buy Dead Space. At least Isaac Clarke has a pair of Spaceballs.